Hey folks, welcome back. This is bonus part 7 in the Generative AI Solutions in the AI-103 course. I'm Rob Fulkrod, lead technical trainer here inside of Microsoft. We've seen our chat applications, but now we have one module, one last section here, that's kind of the pivot point between this and agents. Here we're doing just enough with agents to wet your whistle to get you ready to move into the next agentic development section. So here we're going to take a look at just starting the kind of what is the definition of an agent, where am I going to use them, and what does it look like? So first let's take a look and define what does it mean when we're talking about an agent, and how is that different from a chat application? Because if we look here, and if you squint just right, you will see things on the slide that we have already talked about. We have already discussed large language models. We have already added instructions to those large language models. And when we were in need of more data, we wrote tools. So that feels a lot like what we have seen before. But here we're just going one level deeper. That with this agentic layer, we're not necessarily targeting a specific large language model. This layer here does give us the ability to have flexibility as we start to choose what those language models are. The instructions are also going to differ a little bit when we start to think less about let's have a conversation and more about let's do a particular thing. Our user has identified in our chat conversation, they've identified the need to fill out a particular form. Where we last left them, we told them, you need to go fill out that form. But now, with an agentic approach, we're going to fill out the form for them. We're going to take care of that. We may present them with the information and say, does this look right? They can say, yes, it does, and we can send that on its way. The instructions are going to be more about this is the conversation and these are the actions that we can take. And our tools are going to be more robust, more interesting, more complicated than what we had in the past. So we were looking at simple retrieval tools. Right? When we had our web search tool, when we had our file search tool, we were really concentrating on let's get more data to the agent. Those don't go away. But on top of that, we're going to be more focused in on these are the actions that we can take. These are the APIs that we need to call. These are the tasks that must be started. And maybe even these are the agents that we need to talk to who can get this done. Maybe this is a level 1 who's just figuring out where we're going. And then we've got a series of agents behind us who are specialized in one or more of those tasks. So we bring all of these together to build an agent. And then the addition that we tend to see is this is not usually a one and done. We're not usually making a single pass through this, but we're going to have some sort of loop. We're going to keep going through this because we may need in this not just one action. We may have to call 3 or 4 actions. So we're going to keep going until the process is done. You may hear some folks refer to this as the agentic loop. I think Scott Hanselman, as of lately, I don't know whether he coined it or not, has taken to calling this the ambiguity loop. This is the areas where large language models are particularly effective when we don't have a equals B, C equals D scenario, where we have to draw a little bit of a fuzzier picture. Large language models do a phenomenal job here, but they may have to repeat again and again to get to those solutions. So where are the areas that these are most effective? And this is just a start. You all may have in your mind right now a collection of ideas where agents may be helpful. But one of the first areas is that of routine tasks. we can do the task ourselves. We have been doing the task for a long time, but the task doesn't require a full-on human. Right now it requires a human, potentially because we haven't built another solution, because there's just enough that's vague enough that we haven't been able to build a batch file. We haven't been able to build an application that does this just yet. But with this agentic or ambiguity loop, the automation of some of those tasks may become far more readily available for agents when things are monotonous, when things don't require a lot of human thought. We would love to transfer those off to an agent. On the same side of things, when it grows beyond what a single person can do, when the person is becoming the bottleneck, the reason we can't go faster is because this poor soul is working as fast as they can. If we can transfer that off into an agent and then have that agent scale over the multitudes of systems that we have. When we need analysis in real time, when data is coming in at potentially such a scale that we can't have a single person deciding on all of that, when it's at that level that agents are successfully making those decisions, that they're looking at the incoming data, and we've been able to hem them into the right direction where they can then surface those insights. One of the areas that I just see in something like this all the time right now is like log files, that I need to do an analysis of this log file, and that log file is huge, and the scrolling through or trying to find some sort of regular expression that extracts the things that I need from it, agents can be phenomenal at dealing with massive amounts of data in real time. And then the other opportunity here is that agents don't really need a lot of PTO time, right? They don't need to take a lot of vacation. They can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are more and more a global enterprise, that there are folks all over the world who need services, help, sales. And if your organization is hemmed into a particular time zone, then it would be really helpful if that agent or those agent tools are still available 24 hours a day. So those are the kind of the categories, but what are some of the use cases that we might see? So the first might be kind of a personal productivity side of things, right? That I need certain tasks that are done. I can tell you absolutely on this particular PowerPoint deck that's in front of you, there's a summary at the end of every single section. And I didn't write that summary to start. I said, hey, agent, build me the summary at the end of each one of these sections. And I went through and I edited it and I cleaned it up. But I didn't start with those. As a matter of fact, I remember very distinctly having 4 different screens open and having 4 agents running on all of those at the same time, building those. Personal productivity is super helpful when it comes to augmenting your own abilities. But it could be sales, right? That we've found, a user has found us. They are on the site. They came to us. Now, let's have a conversation with them. Let's find the products that they need. Or, flip side of that, we are the agent. I need you to go through and going through all of my customers right now, find the opportunities for this new thing that we've developed, right? Find those leads, draft an email for me, let me see that, and then send that out. I had a conversation. Here we were talking about research, but still in the idea of sales, I had a customer who was talking to me very specifically about doing a bunch of research by way of agents to develop an entire new product line at their organization. They used the research capabilities of these agents to find out what that market would look like and to start building the proposal for that brand new product line. Right. So are there any major shifts in there? Or generate a summary summaries are phenomenal, right? Generate a summary of this 2 pages of activity. What do we need to know? How can we synthesize that very quickly? And customer service. That there are a number of activities that, while a customer is going to say, this is what I need, we don't necessarily need a person to go grab that file and to hand it off. That we just need an agent to be able to translate and to be able to key in on those important terms, figure out what the action is going to be, and take care of that for us. Create the log, create the visibility so we see the action that's there, but we don't necessarily need to escalate to a person every single time. So what does it look like to build an agent? Well, from our perspective here, step 1, you're going to go build yourself a Foundry project. All right. We build the Foundry resource. In that resource, we're going to drop a project. Then we're going to create the agent. So an agent is going to be a combination of instructions and models and tools. So select all the work that we did earlier today on finding the models that we need, on making sure that they're optimized. All of those things take place, and then we build this agent layer over the top. We create those instructions, we craft the tools that are necessary, and we bring those all together. We can then test that agent in the playground and keep a completely server-side version of that agent. What's really cool here is having this on the server side. We can have multiple applications that are all using that same agent. And while we're there, we rev on that, right? We check out, we find out the weak points, we find where it's a little bit lacking. We can do all of that inside of the Foundry if we'd like. Then we can deploy that to where it's really going to be hosted, the long-term solution, and potentially integrate that into our applications. So the things that we're going to have for all of this, you're going to build yourself a Foundry project. Foundry gives us, again, the agents, the models, those tools and assets wrapped around it, and we will pick a particular model that's going to be deployed. Now, along the way, we may run into a bunch of other resources that we may need. We may bring in something like Azure AI Search as our RAG opportunity. We may bring in storage accounts, again, for potentially RAG opportunities or also potentially for output. We're going to see a number of kind of vision and speech scenarios where we have to write files down. So we might bring in something like Azure Storage. We may bring in Key Vault to handle some of the maybe the API keys or the security credentials that are needed when we're integrating between multiple systems, and potentially Azure Functions as a mechanism to have kind of on-demand compute when we need to extend beyond the compute of the agent itself. Now, my initial conversation in that slide was go to Foundry Portal. Go build that inside of the portal. It's great for prototyping. We get a visual representation. We can click our way through and succeed. Life is good there. The downside to something like that is the repeatability, right? So we also have a code-based solution. The things that we are doing there inside of the portal, we can do with code. We can build agents completely from code. That gives us the ability to check that into version control and handle maybe the code reviews a lot easier than doing that through some sort of user interface. Right, so a code-first approach is definitely a very common approach, especially as you've done this more and more. Early on, a lot of things may start in the portal, that might start in the user interface, but as you all are developing more and more skills and this is becoming more commonplace, then more formalization inside of code would be equally appropriate. It doesn't mean a thing if we don't actually do it. So let's take a look at building an agent inside of Foundry, then interact with it by way of code.
Let's start by swinging into Foundry. At this point in time, we've already built a project. We've got that up and running. We have deployed a few models in place. We'll be using the GPT 4.1 model one more time. We'll go here into agents, and we will go and build a brand new agent. At this point in time, we'll give this the name here of IT support agent, right? And we will give it some tools to lend support to those who need it. So right off the bat, we want to give it a decent voice in all of this. So we've got an instruction set that we will include here. You're an IT support agent from Contoso. You're going to help employees with technical issues and IT policy questions, and a series of guidelines here that are for the system. Now, to make this a little bit more of a little bit more than just chat, we'll include some tools in place. Go ahead and add in here the code interpreter, okay. And we will add a file search. We will build a brand new index. We talked earlier about the ability for large language models to go and use RAG to pull resources in. So here we're going to drag in an IT policy file. Want to take a look at that, we will see just what the policy file looks like, password reset, or software installation requests, et cetera, and so forth. So just kind of general information about our IT policies. We're including one file to make this nice and easy, but we can obviously include a whole bunch of different files and in different formats. So we will attach that. And then we will do the same. There we go. We will do the same for the code interpreter here. The code interpreter will go ahead and add some files as well. And in this case, we've got a system performance file that is CSV that just has a quick series of columns in here about system performance. Take a quick look. That looks like. So CPU percentage, memory, disk, network. And so now we've got a little bit of data. We've got it set up to understand its role. All right, so now that we've got the agent set up, let's go ahead and perform a couple of tests. So we will start by testing just its ability to hit the RAG systems there. So what's the policy for password resets? In this case here, getting a good policy reset in there, well-grounded, and it is referencing the IT policy file. We can continue. We'll try one more time here with our a new software request. Looking good. Again, well-grounded, coming back with the data from the file and a reference to the file itself. Cool. Let's now test its ability to look at the internal data in our system performance data. So can you analyze the system performance data and tell me, are there any concerning trends? Here should pick up on that keyword system performance, go back to the code tool. Excellent. We can see here that it's written a bunch of Python code. We can see what that code looks like. We can see the file itself that it's analyzing. And concerning trends, the main issue here are high CPU and memory utilization. Right. If you'd like more specific information, like graphs or specific timestamps, let me know. I actually really like that idea. Why don't we ask it for a chart of CPU over time? Again, this is going to go back to the code tool. Should ask it then to build us a chart and then give us the opportunity to download the chart. Okay, so let's go take a look at the chart. Perfect. And so here we see we're getting some spikes above the 90% mark. Looks like multiple times. All right, let's close that out. And Let's go and take a look at what this looks like from a code perspective. So we have our IT support agent. Our IT support agent is sitting inside of our project demo 5661. So let's swing into VS Code. And we've got a few things that we're going to look at here inside of VS Code. Number one, earlier we installed the toolkit. So we're going to look at the toolkit here, and inside the toolkit we have the models that we have been using, and we've tested those before. But what we also have, if we go ahead and refresh, is we should also have here our IT support agent that we didn't have just a second ago. And we can continue to use and test that. We could have built that from here as well, but we could start asking questions again of the system. What is the policy for reporting a lost or stolen device? Oh, one real quick. So what I saw in this, we've got the agent here, and I saw immediately we went to web search. All right, so that's important. So right now we are scanning the web, which means, as we have seen before, good demos are ruined by a lack of save. So, so that nothing up my sleeve here, let's save our agent. There we go. Now we've got V2 out there. Life is good. We'll go back over here and we will reopen up that agent. Of said agent. There we go. And run. There we are. In this case here, we're seeing it successfully use the file search. We're in good shape. We just want to make sure we're grabbing the latest agent. So life is good there. All right, so then let's go and grab the project endpoint. This is the first time that we've grabbed this endpoint, because up to this point here, we've been talking to the large language models directly, in which case the OpenAI endpoint was perfect. But here, we're zooming out a little bit, and we've got this higher level abstraction of an agent to be used. So in this case, we want the project endpoint there. So we're going to swing into our code, into our environment file, and you can see what we're asking for right here. We're putting in the project endpoint, and we're putting in the agent name. In the past, we were saying, well, what was the model? Well, the model is dictated by the underlying agent. We don't have to talk about what the model is or what the tools are that are installed. The application doesn't concern itself with those lower level details. It's just, I need this particular agent. So we will save. We'll dip back into the agent itself. And we have in here a little bit different set of includes that we are bringing in. So instead of bringing in OpenAI directly, we are bringing in Azure AI projects. If we look at our requirements file, we'll see that we want projects in here and identity are the two major players. Now, that isn't to say OpenAI isn't there. If we were to dig deeply into the dependencies of our dependencies and start taking a look at the libraries in here, we would see that OpenAI is indeed a dependency of our dependencies. It's there, but it's just not a top level dependency at this point. So we're bringing in our AI project client. We start off with a series of kind of helper functions. But when we get into the main project, we are, as we have seen before, using the default Azure credential to authenticate ourselves to the project. And then here is a new use now of the AI project client, passing in the credential and passing in the project endpoint. Again, not the OpenAI endpoint. Not to say it isn't there. You'll notice we're going immediately from project client to get OpenAI client so that we can reference it beneath the covers. And we are then using the conversations endpoint. the conversations API with all of this. Then we're into our standard game loop here. Conversations, we're going to add a new conversation in there. Here's our role, passing in our conversation ID that we started up top so that we can get the history of that conversation in place. And then these conversations, you saw that when we were building this in the agent itself, they can be a little bit more complicated, like there can be files that need to be downloaded and such. So we do have a code base in here that is going to look to see, are there any files? Do we need to download those? Do we have to bring those in? So we'll hop into the terminal here, make sure that's all saved. Everything is looking good there. And let's get Python agent up and running. We didn't see this on camera. I've already gone through and activated the virtual environment. We are using, I probably should have said this at the top, but we are using 3.13 Python right now as of the writing of, or the recording of this this video here. The labs are still based on 3.13. That may change by the time you're reading this. Take a look at the README for the labs to understand what the requirements are. But anyway, we give this a nice little run. We connect up. We'll grab ourselves the agent, and then we'll just start asking the familiar question about policy reset. There we go. Drop that in there. What's the policy for password reset? All right. Doso, life is good there. Let's go back to our questions about system performance and make sure that we get a decent chart out of this. All right, so then let's take a look at the code tool, and we will check to see about system performance again. So analyze the system performance data and identify any periods where CPU utilization exceeds 80%. All right, so here are the periods, right? There's a bunch of them in there. It just looks like a bunch of numbers to me. So let's go and ask for a chart. Let's create a line chart showing memory usage trends over time. It should then use that and use the matplotlib library, build us a chart. The system should then download that and give us a reference to it. There we go. Life is good. So here we have our new chart. Not too shabby. All right. If we needed to do a little bit more statistical analysis in all of that, we absolutely could. Bring that up a little bit here. Agent is thinking. There we go. What is the average minimum and maximum values in there if we were needed to do even deeper analysis? Okay. Find any correlation between the two. There are libraries inside of Python where it can rely on that and give us back a strong positive correlation there, right? So we get a coefficient of 97%. I don't know what that means. Tell me what that means. Show your work. Right. And so then we can get a description, right, of what's going on. So high utilization, you see one, they're increasing together there, CPU and memory percentage, right? And so giving us an idea of how this is coming together. Right? So not too bad. The key here, what we're looking at really, is that the application got to rely on a pre-built agent, and this could be one of several applications that are doing this, as opposed to what we were doing earlier in the sessions, where we had to manually work with those tools. We had to manually set up the LLM. Now here we're just referring to an existing agent.
All right, so how did you all do? Let's do a knowledge check. Okay, number one, what's the primary benefit of using Microsoft Foundry agent service compared to building agents with standard APIs? And what we see is that it handles things like tool calling and state management, some of that infrastructure automatically. Number two, how does Microsoft Foundry agent service handle conversational state? And this is very similar to our earlier example. It uses that responses API, so it automatically has that conversation context back on the server. So this is a beginning and an end. So at the end, this is the end of our very first segment with Azure Foundry. But there's so much more ahead of us. So right now we've taken a look at just starting with agents sitting on top of our conversational, our chat APIs from earlier. Agents give us that combination approach of models and tools, along with maybe some goals, some activities that it can perform. They're best for things that are repetitive. And then we took a look at building agents. We used the Foundry SDK, and this was the first time that we were using the Foundry SDK as opposed to the OpenAI SDK. Built that inside of VS Code and got our very first agent up and running. We also saw that there could be a couple of different approaches, and we did a little bit of each, but it could be a Foundry scenario where we're building that off in the Foundry user interface, or it could be a complete code-based scenario. This finishes up the very first topic of the AI-102 course. In here, we have talked about Foundry, creating projects inside of Foundry. We've taken a look at selecting the model and then making sure the model was appropriately fit for our application. We looked at building chat applications and extending those chat applications with various tools to give them further knowledge. We have taken the underlying models and made sure that they had the right performance characteristics that we were looking for in our application, that they knew the right things and they were behaving the right way. We then took a look at responsible AI and made sure that we had a plan in place to validate the security risks of our AI application. And then finally, we added this little candy coating over the top of it where we built our very first agent. We've got so much more of that to come. The next section that we're going to be looking at in this AI-103 course is the agentic workflows. So we'll spend more time there, and then we'll take a look at other Foundry tools continuing that path. There's so much more ahead of us, and even what we've done so far, if you wanted to see some of those code samples, if you wanted to dig deeper into some of that information, all of that is available on Microsoft Learn, and you can find that at aka.ms/learn.